Today, we're introducing rallies and forehand and backhand ground strokes. Let's start by looking at a rally. A rally is when two players or four players are hitting the ball back and forth, as you can see. Rallies might be competitive, like in a game situation, or they might be cooperative, like you're seeing here. When we're rallying cooperatively, sometimes we'll allow the ball to bounce twice before we hit it, or do other things that we wouldn't do normally in a match. The purpose is just to keep the ball going back and forth in a cooperative rally. It's also worth noting that the type of strokes that we're hitting are called ground strokes because they hit the ground before we hit the ball. Now let's take a closer look at our ground strokes, starting with the forehand side. You'll remember from the rally progression that forehands are hit on the dominant side of the body. Now let's slow it down and look at the four phases that make up a ground stroke. The first phase is preparation. In preparation, we link the racket face and our chest so that they're pointed the same direction. We drop the racket head and prepare to swing in what's called execution. Then we go into extension and follow through. Within each phase there are additional cues, but the most important is that the racket face and the chest stay pointed in the same direction during preparation, execution, and extension. Once you reach follow through, you can relax your arm. And as you can see, our stroke doesn't have to be perfect every time. For now, just focus on getting your chest all the way to your target at the end of the stroke. Now let's look at the backhand side. Backhands are hit on the non-dominant side and can be done using one hand like you see here, or two hands, which we'll show a little bit later. Because this tends to be a little bit weaker side for most players, it's important to use your body weight by leaning forward onto your front foot as you swing at the ball. The backhand also uses the same four phases, starting with preparation, in which we'll link the racket face and the chest, just like we did on the forehand side. However, this is the only time where we'll have this linkage. Next we go into execution, followed by our extension, and then follow through. You'll notice that on this stroke, we don't rotate the chest towards the court like we did on the forehand. As I mentioned before, this side tends to be harder for most players, so don't feel like you've got to master it right away. You've also got another option on this side, which is to use two hands. On the two-handed backhand, your non-dominant hand takes control of the racket and follows the exact same cues that you would on a forehand, just switched over to that non-dominant hand. Don't let your dominant hand try to take control of this stroke, as it'll limit your mobility on this side. And there you have it. Now you've got all the tools you need to start working on your ground strokes. Don't feel like they have to be perfect right away. If you just push the ball back and forth to start, or take a short preparation phase, you should be just fine. Just make sure that you're using each practice session to work on improving your technique, as it'll make it much easier in the future to have longer rallies. And that's all we have for this week's rally. Next week, you're going to see a little bit more in-depth technical analysis of the forehand and backhand ground strokes. It's important that you gain some consistency this week and work on being able to make that ball back and forth with a partner, so that next week when you start working on the technique, you're more consistent and able to keep a rally going while working on these technical ideas. That's everything for this week. Practice hard. If you have any questions, reach out to me on email or through Learn, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Have a great week.